A sewing needle for hand sewing is a long slender tool with a pointed tip at one end and a hole at the other. The earliest needles were made of bone or wood. Modern ones are manufactured from high-carbon steel wire and a nickel or 18K gold plated for corrosion resistance. The highest quality embroidery needles are plated with 2/3 platinum and 1/3 titanium alloy. Traditionally, needles have been kept in needle books or needle cases which have become objects of adornment. Sewing needles may also be kept in an etui, a small box that held needles and other items such as scissors, pencils and tweezers. Types of hand sewing needles. Hand sewing needles come in a variety of types, classes designed according to their intended use and in a variety of sizes within each type. Sharp needles. Used for general hand sewing, built with a sharp point, a round eye, and are of medium length. Those with a double eyes are able to carry 2 strands of thread while minimizing fabric friction. Appliquette. These are considered another all-purpose needle for sewing, applique, and patchwork. Embroidery. Betweens or quilting. These needles are shorter than sharps, with a small rounded eye and are used for making fine stitches on heavy fabrics such as in tailoring, quilt making and other detailed handwork. Note that some manufacturers also distinguish between quilting needles and quilting between needles, the latter being slightly shorter and narrower than the former. Milliners. A class of needles generally longer than sharps, useful for basting and pleating, normally used in millinery work. Easy or self-threading, also called calyx-side sharps, side threading, and spiral eye needles. These needles have an open slot into which a thread may easily be guided rather than the usual closed eye design. Beading. These needles are very fine, with a narrow eye to enable them to fit through the center of beads and sequins along with a long shaft to thread and hold a number of beads at a time. Bodkin, also called ballpoints. This is a long, thick needle with a ballpoint end and a large, elongated eye. They can be flat or round and are generally used for threading elastic, ribbon or tape through casings and lace openings. Chenille. These are similar to tapestry needles but with large, long eyes and a very sharp point to penetrate closely woven fabrics. Useful for ribbon embroidery. Darning. Sometimes called finishing needles. These are designed with a blunt tip and large eye, making them similar to tapestry needles but longer. Yarn darners are the heaviest subvariety. Doll. Not designed for hand sewing at all, these needles are made long and thin and are used for soft sculpturing on dolls, particularly facial details. Leather. Also known as glovers and as wedge needles. These have a triangular point designed to pierce leather without tearing it, often used on leather-like materials such as vinyl and plastic. Sailmaker. Similar to leather needles, but the triangular point extends further up the shaft, designed for sewing thick canvas or heavy leather. Tapestry. The large eye on these needles lets them to carry a heavier weight yarn than other needles, and the blunt tip, usually bent at a slight angle from the rest of the needle, allows them to pass through loosely woven fabrics such as embroidery, canvas or even weave material without catching or tearing it. Comes in a double-eyed version for use on a mounted frame and with 2 colors of thread. Tatting. These are built long with an even thickness for their entire length, including at the eye, to enable thread to be pulled through the double stitches used in tatting. Upholstery. These needles are heavy, long needles that may be straight or curved and are used for sewing heavy fabrics, upholstery work, tufting and for tying quilts. The curved variety is practical for difficult situations on furniture where a straight needle will not work heavy duty. 12 needles are used for repairing mattresses. Straight sizes: 3-12 long, curved, 1.5-6 long. Needle size. Needle size is denoted by one or more numbers on the manufacturer's packet. The general convention for sizing of needles, like that of wire gauges, is that within any given class of needle the length and thickness of a needle increases as the size number decreases. For example, a size 9 needle will be thicker and longer than a size 12 needle. However, a size 10 of one class may be either thinner or finer than a size 12 of another type. Where a packet contains a needle count followed by two size numbers such as 20 sharps 5/10, the second set of numbers correspond to the range of sizes of needle within the packet. In this case, typically 10 sharps needles of size 5 and 10 of size 10. As another example, a packet labeled 16 milliners 3/9 would contain 16 milliners needles ranging in sizes from 3 to 9. History. Prehistoric sewing needles. A variety of archaeological finds illustrate sewing has been present for thousands of years. A point that might be from a bone needle dates to 61,000 years ago and was discovered in Sibadu Cave, South Africa. Ivory needles were also found dated to 30,000 years ago at the Kostenki site in Russia. A bone needle, dated to the Aurignacian age, was discovered in Potok Cave in the eastern Karavanka, Slovenia. Native Americans were known to use sewing needles from natural sources. One such source, the agave plant, provided both the needle and the thread. The agave leaf would be soaked for an extended period of time, leaving a pulp, long, stringy fibers and a sharp tip connecting the ends of the fibers. The needle is essentially what was the tip end of the leaf. Once the fibers dried, the fibers and needle could then be used to sew together for deer bones. Ancient sewing needles. The first form of needle was probably hide thonging, using an end strengthened by dried blood or other natural materials. Traces of this survive in the use of bodkins to make eyelet holes in fabric by separating rather than cutting the threads. A form of needle lace named gnarly binding seems to generally predate knitting and crochet by thousands of years, partly because it can use far shorter rough-graded threads than knitting does. Sewing needles are an application of wire-making technology, which started to appear in the 2nd millennium BCE. Some fine examples of Bronze Age gold forks are made of very consistent gold wire, which is more malleable than bronze. However, copper and bronze needles do not need to be as long. The eye can be made by turning the wire back on itself and redrawing it through the die. Later sewing needles. The next major breakthrough in needle making was the arrival of high-quality steel-making technology from China in the 10th century, principally in Spain in the form of the Catalan furnace, which soon extended to produce reasonably high-quality steel in significant volumes. This technology later extended to Germany and France, although not significantly in England. However, the expulsion of the Muslims at the end of the 15th century caused a significant setback, and it was only in the early 17th century that steel needles became common with the English breakthroughs in steel working technology. Some iron needles had been used previously, often filed and therefore of relatively poor quality, quite apart from being brittle.